The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear, bridges we burn, we make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be right here. Right here, and when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for
you. This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friend. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful best day ever. And for those of you who are tuning into the classroom for the first time, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth. And it's my hope that you will embrace the truth, a new truth, and a new way to live. And so today we have Dr. William Davis, MD, and he is a cardiologist, and I'm sure you've learned about him. He is the author of Wheat Belly series, New York Times bestselling author. The last time he was in the classroom was for his book, Undoctored, and now he has a new book, and the book is called Super Gut. I'm excited about this one, and stay tuned because there's more to this coming up with Dr. Davis. But this is a 4-week plan to reprogram your microbiome, restore your health, and lose weight. Well, I say release weight. And so we are so excited to have Dr. William Davis back in the classroom because we need to learn about what creates joy in our life, what creates balance in our life. And if you think it's the things that we have, think again. Dr. Davis is going to talk to us about some of these little microbes that are a little pesky and a little hidden in our lives. And we're going to figure out how we're going to work together to figure out how to bring those back into our gut. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am so grateful that Dr. William Davis is here to do just that. Welcome back to the classroom, although it's been since 2017, but I am so glad you're here.
Thanks, Lily. Good to be back.
I am glad that you're here too. Okay, so this is the question of the day, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot. How do you go from cardiologist to specializing in the gut?
Well, it was a stepwise process involving some successes and some blunders. So, just doing the basic programs, which is wheat and grain elimination, avoidance of sugar, addressing nutrients that are lacking in modern life, not because of the diet, but because of modern life. For instance, we can't go to the ocean, river, or stream to drink water, right? It's contaminated. It's got sewage runoff, got other things. So we have to drink filtered water. Well, water filtration removes all magnesium. We have to supplement magnesium. Likewise with vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, iodine, common nutrients lacking in modern lives. But when put together, have fairly synergistic and magnificent effects, including a reversal of insulin resistance, the thing that keeps you from losing weight. So we reverse that with a combination of the diet and those nutrients, and it works. I also had basic efforts to restore a healthy gastrointestinal microbiome. So we have to accept, Lily, that the modern gastrointestinal microbiome, that is the collection of trillions of microbes in the GI tract, has been massively disrupted by numerous factors in modern life, such as the overexposure to antibiotics. So even if you take basic efforts, let's say a high-potency multi-species probiotic, some fermented foods, and some prebiotic fibers, some basic efforts, even that is not enough. And I saw people having magnificent successes, but then falling short of perfection, saying things like, I lost 73 pounds, but I've got 35 more to go, and I've hit a plateau. Or I was a type 2 diabetic running hemoglobin A1Cs of 11.7%, which is terrible. You're set up for kidney failure and heart disease and stroke. I got it down to 5.9%, much better. short of perfect, which is 5.0% or less, or some other residual problem. So I asked, well, what are we not addressing fully? It became clear that the answers were in the gastrointestinal microbiome. And the great thing about that is once you start to recognize that, you are given a spectacular collection of strategies to further gain back control over health.
I love your book because it gives us a simple guide to become aware of what's missing in our life, to make that leap between cardiology to the gut. And you're not a gastroenterologist, you're a cardiologist. So, but isn't it amazing how we're so connected? Everything in our body is so connected, but we treat it as an individual. Like if I have problems with my stomach, I go to a gastroenterologist. If something is wrong with my heart, I go to a cardiologist. Something wrong with my endocrine system, I go to endocrinologist. But isn't it amazing how the gut seems to be the go-to? So I'm really grateful that you've discovered this. And so with that in mind, what are some of these microbiome disruptors that you talked about antibiotics, but is that the end all be all, or what are some of the things that are also changing the way our gut expresses itself?
Sadly, Lily, the list is long. It includes such things as glyphosate, the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup, which is an herbicide, yes, but it's also an antibiotic. But it's an antibiotic of the worst kind because it kills off healthy microbes like probiotic species and is ineffective against fecal microbes like food poisoning microbes. So other herbicides, other pesticides, preservatives like sodium benzoate that kill microbes in food, but also in you. Emulsifying agents that keep your ice cream and salad dressing mixed like polysorbate 80, which also emulsifies your intestinal mucus barrier. The polyethylene glycol they use to prep you for a colonoscopy is a massive disruptor of the mucus barrier and intestinal microbiome. Common drugs, stomach acid blocking drugs, anti-inflammatory drugs, statin cholesterol drugs, all disrupt the composition of the gastrointestinal microbiome. And so the end result is that we've lost literally hundreds of beneficial species, the ones most susceptible to those effects. So ironically, the ones most susceptible are the ones that are important to our health. And the ones least susceptible are those fecal microbes like E. coli and Salmonella and Campylobacter, who most people would recognize those names because those are also the species of food poisoning. So those are the guys that survive this onslaught of antimicrobial effects, and we're left with an overabundance of essentially fecal microbes. Now, the thing that really opened my eyes a few years ago was this idea that these microbes, fecal species, can ascend. They belong in the colon. And the colon is well suited to dealing with those guys. It has a thick 2-layer mucus barrier to protect the intestinal lining. Mm-hmm. But the small bowel, the 24 feet of small intestine, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, is not well equipped to deal with fecal microbes. It has a thinner single-layer mucus barrier. So when those fecal microbes ascend into the small intestine, trillions of microbes that only live for a few hours, when they die, they release some of their components, such as something called endotoxin that gets into the bloodstream. That's a process called endotoxemia. And the validation of that concept that occurred in 2007 by a European group, corroborated many times over since then, now explains to us how microbes in the GI tract can be experienced as depression in the brain, or dementia, or Parkinson's disease in the brain, or as muscle aches, joint aches of fibromyalgia, or as metabolic diseases like fatty liver, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, or skin diseases like psoriasis and rosacea. In other words, we've got to reconsider virtually all common chronic diseases in light of the fact that there's a major contribution, either causal or a worsening effect of the gastrointestinal microbiome via this process called endotoxemia.
So endotoxemia, basically, people are going to the doctor and they're giving it a label, like what I'm hearing you say is endotoxemia is basically what they're talking about other symptoms that the body is expressing itself, like dementia, cognitive decline, all these things. Instead of calling it endotoxemia, can they deal with endotoxemia as a whole and maybe eliminate all these other conditions?
Yes, exactly. So you put your finger right on the crux of the matter. That is, the doctor's going to label it hypertension or depression or anxiety or rosacea or restless leg syndrome, right? When at the root of a lot of this is endotoxemia, is the overgrowth in the small bowel, so-called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, the endotoxemia that results from SIBO. Now, not to say that all disease is caused by this, but a lot of disease is either caused by this process or worsened by it. So if all you do for somebody with depression is give them something that increases serotonin, you have not done that person much of a favor, because you've not addressed the underlying cause, which is, and by the way, Lily, this science has advanced dramatically in the last decade. Now there's several studies. If I take that endotoxin and inject it into the bloodstream of a non-depressed person, they become depressed within 3 hours. And if you perform an MRI of the brain, it shows all the hallmarks of depression. So that and many similar studies are telling us, oh yeah, endotoxemia is the driving force in much human disease. Unfortunately, it's going to take a generation for my colleagues to catch up to the science. So right now, I wish I could tell you, go to your doctor and say, hey, doc, I think I have endotoxemia.
Yes, that's my point. That's my point. It's like, okay, they'll give you a pill to cure all ill. They'll say, and I don't know if you remember this, but my registered service marks, you can take a pill, you can take responsibility. It's not that I'm against the pill, but I'm for doing everything we can naturally to give the body what it needs so it could do what it needs to do. But endotoxemia sounds like something that you can nip it there. You can nip it there and say, okay, what do we do to fix endotoxemia? Do they know how to fix endotoxemia other than calling it something else and giving you a different pill for everything else?
Well, let me tell you about my preliminary experience. It is preliminary. It's anecdotal. It's based on about 40 people. So as you know, even if your doctor knew, so if one of your listeners went to the doctor and say, doc, I think I have SIBO and endotoxemia, 99% of the time they're going to say, did you consult Dr. Google again? Don't waste my time. There's nothing wrong with you. We didn't see anything wrong in your colonoscopy. All the idiotic answers that my colleagues are very good at dispensing. I say they're very good at dispensing ignorance with authority. If they do know something about it, they'll almost invariably write a prescription for the conventional antibiotic rifaximin or Xifaxan. You might have seen some of the commercials for irritable bowel syndrome to take Xifaxan. And it works about 50% of the time. It's expensive. It's a conventional antibiotics are part of the reason we got here.
That's right.
I'm very reluctant to suggest take more antibiotics. And there's, of course, risk of C. diff, as with all antibiotics. Well, here's some reasoning I use. Simple reasoning. Very simple, Lily. I asked, what if you just took an off-the-shelf conventional probiotic for your SIBO and endotoxemia? Will it work? Not really. It might reduce the bloating, diarrhea a little bit temporarily, but you'll still be left with 30 feet of microbes releasing their endotoxin. So ask these questions. What if we chose microbes that are known to take up residence in the small intestine? That's where SIBO occurs. And choose microbes known to produce what are called bacteriocins. These are natural antibiotics. Pharma knows all about this. That's where their new antibiotics are coming from. The analyses of the bacteriocins microbes produce. Well, we can get those microbes. So I chose 3 strains of microbes, a strain of Lactobacillus gasseri, another strain of Lactobacillus reuteri. Those two colonize the upper GI tract. And I threw in Bacillus coagulans because it does produce a bacteriocin, and by the way, makes the most tasty yogurt you ever had. So I co-ferment all 3. Now we use fermentation. I call it yogurt. It's not yogurt. It's not like the stuff in the store. I call it yogurt because it looks and smells like yogurt, but it's not yogurt. It's a fermentation process. We use extended fermentation. Microbes, as you know, don't have sex, right? There's no male and female microbes. They have so-called asexual reproduction. They just reproduce themselves. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, etc. So reuteri, for instance, one of the 3 microbes, doubles every 3 hours at human body temperature. Well, if you do like a factory, when they make commercial yogurt, they let it ferment for 4 to 6 hours. You've got nothing in the way of microbes. We're going to ferment for 36 hours, allow it to double at least 12 times, which doesn't sound like a lot till you actually count the microbes we have using something called flow cytometry. And we get around 300 billion microbes per half cup serving. And then we consume this, what I call SIBO yogurt. So far across I did this hoping for some people to get better. I did not expect 90% to get better. Now, I know this not just by symptoms, but there's a new consumer device.
Yeah.
You blow into it, measures hydrogen gas, and then it talks to your smartphone 0 to 10. 0, nothing, 10, a lot. And any increase in 4 units is a positive reading. And so I had tons of people doing this. Lo and behold, 1, SIBO was everywhere. 2, 90% of people normalized their hydrogen gas on this device with this SIBO yogurt. Now we will I'm going to try to get this done. We have so many clinical trials ongoing right now. It's limited by budget. I'd like to do this in a formal clinical trial to validate that this actually works, but it has performed so far beyond my expectations. I just hope for a modest response. I'm getting the majority normalized. I mean, the great thing is that people say, yeah, I normalized my hydrogen gas by breath testing, and I broke that weight loss plateau finally, or I broke my stuck hemoglobin A1C, or that lingering pain I had, better, but still there with my rheumatoid arthritis, finally gone. In other words, we saw improvements in residual health problems that paralleled the normalization of breath hydrogen gas because of the eradication of SIBO organisms.
Okay, so this mechanism, I think it's called AIRE.
Yes, AIRE.
AIRE. Okay, you blow into it, and does it tell you what microbes you have in your? What is it that what does it translate to? I'm missing something there.
The easiest way to think about this, and don't feel bad if you don't get it, because I called the inventor, Dr. Angus Short, PhD engineer in Dublin, Ireland. I said, because he thought it was a device for FODMAPs diets, low FODMAPs diets, low fiber, low sugar diets.
Okay.
Yeah, to reduce bloating and diarrhea. So I called him. I said, Angus. So I called the inventor. I said, that's not what this is. I said, this is a mapping device. So I'm going to take a baseline level. There's some more detail here I'm not giving. There's a prep, like you can't eat anything for 12 hours ahead of time. Okay. You get a baseline level. Let's say it's 1.2, very low.
Okay.
I consume something microbes like to eat. Like inulin is a good one. It's just a fiber. In a conventional laboratory or clinic, they use lactulose, which is not so good. It's not a good choice, but that's what they do in conventional settings. Or some other prebiotic fiber. Inulin is probably the best, and that's because many microbes, good and bad, can consume inulin. In other words, not every microbe can consume everything. Like animals, like if I gave a deer a piece of steak, it's not going to eat it. Right? It's an herbivore. Same thing with microbes. They don't eat everything. They have selective appetites. So I'm going to take inulin because it's widely consumed by many microbes. Mm-hmm. And then let's see how long it takes to turn positive. So let's say at 30 minutes or 45 minutes, it's still 1.6. But then at, let's say 90 minutes, it turns 9.8. A rise of 4 units or more is positive. Up to 90 minutes. The problem with this technology, not just this, like the whole method, is after 90 minutes, we don't know what that means, because by 90 minutes, the fiber could have reached your colon, where production of hydrogen gas is normal and expected.
Okay.
So we can't distinguish SIBO confined, say, to the distal ileum versus normal colonic fermentation. So it's not a perfect technology, but it did open my eyes, many of us, to know that, well, I used to say SIBO is rare. Oh, no. Not anymore. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And, just to get a sense for just how common it is, we can look at all the studies. There are dozens of studies asking a question like this. If you have condition X, how likely do you have SIBO? So let's take fatty liver. 50% of the American population has fatty liver, and thereby on their way to cirrhosis and liver failure, which is horrifying, by the way. So 50%, that's 160 million people who have fatty liver. We know from the studies, 50% will test positive for SIBO. That's 80 million people just for that condition. How about obese people or type 2 diabetics? Or in other words, we're talking about huge people with irritable bowel syndrome. There's 60 million Americans with irritable bowel syndrome. It varies depending on study and method used, but about 40% will test positive for SIBO. Well, that's 24 million more people right there. Add up the numbers. There's some overlap, of course, obese type 2 diabetics with fatty liver, but you can quickly get a sense that there's likely 150 million or 1 in 2 Americans, more or less, that have this condition. So we're not talking about this rare thing. We're talking about something on a par with the size of the epidemic of overweight and obesity. It's everywhere. The problem is you won't always know it. People say, oh, I feel fine. Here's another thing to know. If you look at all those studies, what proportion of people with condition X have SIBO? They compare it to healthy controls. And what proportion of healthy controls test positive also? It's shocking. Sometimes 40%, 24%, 36%. In other words, healthy is no longer healthy. You might not know it. You might not make the connection. You didn't realize that the fat droplets in the toilet are from SIBO. Maybe you didn't know restless leg syndrome virtually guarantees that's being caused by SIBO. Maybe you didn't know that anxiety is a major symptom of SIBO and CFO, by the way, fungal overgrowth too. So we've got to reconsider virtually all human disease outside like injury, because if you don't, if your doctor just hands you a prescription for an SSRI for depression or an anti-inflammatory for your arthritis or some pharmacologic solution or Band-Aid, I'd say, they have done you a grave disservice that could lead you down the path of diverticular disease, depression, suicide, colon cancer, obesity, etc. But the great thing, Lily, is that the solutions are pretty damn easy. If I said the solution, Lily, is to take your colon out, colectomy, you would say, well, damn it, you better be confident about that, right?
No, I would say no.
What if I said the solution is something akin to yogurt?
I know. When I was learning about this, I just thought, this is so simple. And then as I was learning a little bit more, I'm like, no wonder the system that we are so wrapped in and involved in, whether it's the food, pharmaceutical, all of that, they're working really hard to destroy our healthy microbiome, our healthy microbiota. I remember Dr. Perlmutter, who came in and talked about a fecal transplantation. I'm like, oh my gosh, how are they testing this? How are they making this? And people are just allowing themselves to get swept away in the trust of these companies have a lot to gain with our illness by being sick. And so what I thought was fascinating is that you isolate two microbes that are missing even in children and infants, and how simple it is to give ourselves a chance to be a healthy person at that moment. So share a little bit about these two microbes that you talk about. And it sounds like when you talk sometimes, it sounds like I'm listening to Harry Potter with all these different incantations, because it's all in Latin and it's so it's when you're saying it, it's so easy for you to say it. But for those of you who are listening like me, just know that there are two these are two names that have two totally different, they make a big difference in our gut and why we're so sick today. So if you could share some of these two microbes that you discuss in the book.
Well, these are just two microbes. Of course, there's many more.
Two.
So but these two, I think these two are among the most important. They're at the top of the heap for playing big roles in human health. The key here is to understand that we've lost, most of us, almost all of us have lost those two microbes because they're very susceptible to common antibiotics and other things like glyphosate. So if you took amoxicillin 20 years ago for an upper respiratory infection or a urinary tract infection, you more than likely lost those two microbes. So very susceptible. And that's part of the reason I believe that when restored, we get these big effects. Now, an added advantage is this thing we do with the yogurt. And by the way, if you don't like dairy, you can do non-dairy. You can do other things to ferment, like coconut milk. The recipes are all in my book. There are some additional steps you have to use. You can't have emulsifying agents in it. Yeah, so it's not hard. People get overwhelmed. It's so difficult. No, it's very easy. But we have to get away. One of the things that's confusing to people who make yogurt at home is we're changing the rules, because our goal is not to make yogurt. Our goal is to get super duper high counts of specific bacteria, not the bacteria typically used in conventional yogurt making, because those are kind of boring. They don't do very much. We want these really interesting microbes with really interesting effects, like Gasseri, Lactobacillus gasseri. Now, one of the things we have, this is tedious, and I apologize, but I don't make these things up. I don't make these numbers and designations up. One of the things we have to do when we play with microbes is we've got to be mindful of strain. My favorite example is E. coli. I've got E. coli. Your listeners have E. coli, right? But what if you ate lettuce contaminated with cow manure and thereby E. coli? You could die of that E. coli. Same species, E. coli, different strain. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes strain makes a difference. And with rotari, for instance, there's 200 different strains, and we don't know how many of the shared characteristics are shared by all strains. And so we resort to the strains that have been validated for some specific effect. So with Gasseri, it's the BNR17 strain that is available commercially, by the way. And we know that one very well because a lot of science has been published on that strain. And it has effects, for instance, now you can just take Gasseri and it reduces your waist circumference by an inch. No change in diet, no exercise, just take the Gasseri, which is a pretty astounding thing when you think about it. Now, maybe some people need to lose more than an inch, but imagine just losing it just by getting this microbe. It's like, no one knows exactly why this happens, but it's probably, I think, a reduction in endotoxemia. Because endotoxemia is the driver of insulin resistance. And you may recall that insulin resistance is the driver of abdominal fat, and it blocks your weight loss, your ability to lose that fat. So Gasseri helps you release substantial amount of abdominal fat. It also reduces joint pain and reduces C-reactive protein, an anti-inflammatory effect. Rotari, the data on rotari, most of it comes from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. That's what kind of got me excited about rotari to start with. They actually used a commercial strain of rotari, and I'm sorry, but it's the ATCC 6475 strain.
There we go. Don't write it down. Just replay this again and then write it down. Go ahead.
It's sold as a commercial product from Sweden. It's called BioGaia Gastrus, Gastrus. Now also sold as a product called Osfortis, Osfortis, but originally sold as this Gastrus tablet for babies, because they've done good science to show that babies who took this probiotic had reduction in colic, that fussiness, crying, and regurgitation of breast milk and formula. So the key here is they sold it for babies, so the dose was very, very low, infants. So I got the commercial product, and I said, I want adult dosages. So we made this yogurt out of it to amplify counts. So it starts at 100 million. We're going to increase to many hundreds of billions. So we're increasing counts by 1,000-fold by making the yogurt. And then I wanted to see if some of the MIT experiences played out in humans. And what I saw with the yogurt was, ladies love it because they start to lose their fine wrinkles within a few weeks. Guys love it because it causes a restoration of youthful muscle and strength. There are human data to show that it preserves bone density on a par with drugs for osteoporosis. There is an increase in libido. There is a reduction in appetite, deeper sleep. That's the part I love because I'm a chronic insomniac. Now I sleep through the night, 9 hours straight through with vivid, colorful dreams.
I would love that. I would love that.
So a lot of that was reported in experimental models, and we saw it happen in humans. And so, if you see increased muscle, smoother skin, increased dermal thickness and skin moisture, restoration of youthful libido, increased testosterone. I think it's not a stretch to say, I think what we're experiencing with that microbe is turning the clock back 10 or 20 years. And that's just one microbe. And then Reprogramming also has the added capacity to colonize the upper GI tract, and coupled with Gasseri and Bacillus coagulans, we're seeing, I believe, anecdotally, but in several dozen people, a normalization of hydrogen gas and thereby SIBO and endotoxemia. And that's just, of course, just a handful of microbes.
Well, and that's the thing. I've had doctors say, because before I started doing the show, I was a part of the medical system. I had chronic asthma as a baby, and it came back. It went away when I was about 12-ish, and then it came back the first time I was pregnant. And it came back with a vengeance, to the point where they put me on all these, they put me on acid blockers. I had all these different drugs that they put me on, asthma medication. We're talking about Xolair, Asthmacort, Pulmicort, rescue inhaler, nebulizers. I mean, you name it. I was on all those until Dr. Andrew Saul came on my show, and he said, between the breaks, Lily, I can help you with that. I can help you get off all your medications. And I would take vitamin C. And it's amazing how many people said, you can overdose with vitamin C. And I go, yeah, I get diarrhea. And that's a big deal. It's if I can overdose with something else and it could kill me. But I would rather stick with the vitamin C. So what I'm hearing you say is that, there is a particular strain, a particular Reprogramming, in particular, you were talking about Reprogramming, you can take that and it can help you. But when you go into a health food store, or you speak to somebody, trillion bacteria, different kinds of strains, 100,000 million trillion, whatever. And does it work? And it comes from a cow. It doesn't come from another human. How does that work? How do we take something from a cow that is designed differently and take it and expect for our microbiome to get better?
Well, you highlight, Lily, the problems, the inadequacies of the current crop of commercial probiotics.
Okay.
So what most commercial probiotics are just haphazard collections of microbes. Oh, this microbe seems to be good. Let's throw that in. This one seems to be good. Let's throw that in. There's no rhyme or reason. That's going to change with so-called probiotic 2.0, where some of the probiotic manufacturers are starting to incorporate such things as guild or collaborative effects. Microbes, just like humans, we don't live in isolation. We have partners and families and neighbors and co-workers and communities. Microbes are the same. And if all you do is restore a haphazard collection of microbes, you don't get the chance for that community to form. And that's probably why you take a microbe as a probiotic, and it only takes up residence for a few days or weeks. Unlike a microbe that your mom may, if your mom was healthy, gave you, that you could have that microbe for a lifetime, barring exposure, things like antibiotics. Why the difference? Probably because we're not restoring the community. Now, that science is very preliminary. There's one product I know of, it's called Sugar Shift, that has incorporated a guild or consortium effect. I know this because the microbiologist who formulated it, Dr. Raul Cano in California, he formulated it. But that's the only I know of. And there's going to be other effects. There's going to be what are called obligate anaerobe microbes. These are lots of microbes. The reason why we've only recently come to understand that there are trillions of microbes in the GI tract is because in prior times, all they did was culture it on a petri dish or agar. Most microbes from the GI tract don't grow that way. They die upon exposure to air or oxygen, so-called obligate anaerobes. Well, now it's become clear that there are tons of obligate anaerobes in the human GI tract. But how do you get them back if you don't have them? Because we've lost them. Well, the only one that you can get right now is called Akkermansia muciniphila in a commercial product called Pendulum. Please don't hear this as an endorsement. I have no relationship with them.
What was that again? Pendulum?
The product is called Pendulum. What people are not being told, though, is 95% of us already have Akkermansia. And it's a very expensive product. I would prefer to take the prebiotic fibers that cause a bloom in the people who already have Akkermansia. And you do that for a few pennies. So just get inulin and other prebiotic fibers. The oleic acid of extra virgin olive oil grows Akkermansia. This thing lacking in modern diets. Modern diets are not lacking just in things like magnesium and iodine and omega-3s, but also in collagen and hyaluronic acid. And because we don't eat organ meats, when we're supposed to get up in the morning, right? Grab our club axe or spear and kill something, and then drag it back to camp, eat its brain and heart and pancreas and kidneys, boil the carcass over a fire, in water, make super stews. It mobilizes all the collagen from the tendons and ligaments and organs. And when we eat brain, we get hyaluronic acid, the master moisturizer of the body, not just skin, but also joints, brain, and elsewhere. And hyaluronic acid causes a bloom in akkermansia. So
akkermansia is what helps the gut. Is that what I'm hearing you say, to get akkermansia?
So akkermansia is your friend in most situations.
Okay.
That is, if akkermansia occupies about 5% of the entire population of microbes in your GI tract, it does good things for you. It causes mucus production to protect your intestinal lining. Okay. It reduces blood sugar, blood pressure. It makes you happier, gives you better sleep. Now, as an aside, akkermansia also has another phase. And this happens when people start to neglect intake of fibers, prebiotic fibers, not nonsense brand fiber. That's garbage. That's the misinterpretation of dietary advice by government agencies and nutritionists. So I'm talking about the fibers that are consumed by microbes. So when you deprive akkermansia of those fibers, so akkermansia's full name is Akkermansia muciniphila, mucus lover. It starts to eat your intestinal mucus barrier, which is very bad. You get colitis, intestinal inflammation, endotoxemia. And that's why people who do these carnivorous or ketogenic diets, and they get these wonderful upfront effects. Oh, I lost 53 pounds. My blood pressure's down. My triglycerides are dropped. My blood sugar's dropped. And then typically about 18 months in, they say, I'm getting constipated. And my triglycerides going back up. I'm regaining weight. My blood pressure's going up. My blood sugar's going up because they induced intestinal inflammation and endotoxemia, not recognizing that humans aren't meant to survive on prolonged ketosis or lack of prebiotic fiber. It's not ketosis per se. It's not ketones per se. That's the problem. They're not harmful. It's the absence of fibers. Now, this is not always true for some of the people following those diets, but it's true for a lot of them who are not aware, because a lot of the people who advocate for these diets barely know what they're doing and don't recognize that you've got to feed the microbes. And this idea that you don't have to because ketosis feeds the microbes is nonsense. They made that up. It reminds me of the old Dean Ornish explanation for his diet. That's the super low-fat vegetarian diet. I called him. I said, hey, we're doing your diet. This is 30 years ago. I say, everybody's triglycerides are going way up, 250. Their HDL, cholesterol, dropping to the floor. Their blood sugar's going up. They're having explosions, small LDL particles that cause coronary disease. He says, oh, don't worry about it. As long as you're vegetarian, it won't hurt you. He made that up. There's no such evidence.
Dean Ornish did that?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
By the way, he never reversed coronary disease. He claims he does, as does Caldwell Esselstyn. They did not. Neither are cardiologists. There are deep flaws, both in the performance of the clinical trial, misinterpretations of the evidence, that there are procedural mistakes they made, there are interpretive mistakes they made, and I don't call 24 people having bypass surgery, heart attacks, and hospitalization for heart failure successes, yet they did call those successes. So there's a lot of nonsense out there. So my point being, so anyway, back to the point I was trying to make. Probiotic 2.0 means we're going to be able to encapsulate those anaerobes that die. A very important one, for instance, is Fecalibacterium. Very important. If we could restore or rebuild that, it means dramatic metabolic benefits in weight loss, blood sugar, blood pressure, et cetera. So the probiotic of the future is going to be a lot smarter, a lot more effective. It also means, though, the current crop of probiotics, because they're so competitive and only have modest benefits, there's a lot of gimmickry going on.
Yeah. Wild
claims. Only spore-based, soil-sourced microbes. That's not true. That's a fairy tale. Or we double encapsulate our probiotic to inhibit release in the small bowel and encourage release in the colon. Well, that's dumb too, right? We want release into the small bowel because that's where 50% of the population has fecal microbes. So just beware when you buy these commercial probiotics. Expectations should be low, but it should improve dramatically in the coming 2 to 5 years.
Okay. So for those of you who have questions for Dr. Davis, it's so important for you to type in a Q, write your question down, and we'll get to them either before or just we have about maybe 5 minutes or so after the class today. So I want you to know that if you're like listening to this and you're being blown away because there's just so many words that, okay, like, where do I get that? Because we want to be part of the solution, right? We want to be part of the solution. So go to whenyouneedafriend.com. That's where this is where we take 100% responsibility, ownership for our life. And if you are a subscriber already, you have all of Dr. Davis's information. But if you're not a subscriber, while you're there, please subscribe, like and follow me on all social media, and also share this video with your friends, especially somebody who has been diagnosed with SIBO or irritable bowel syndrome or any, you hear dementia, diabetes, all these things. There could be microbes missing that are crucial to your health. So just share the video, and while you're there, check out my sponsors, because my sponsors are supporting the classroom, so please support them the way that they are supporting the classroom. You can go to my Shop Now bag. We have different events going on. We're going to do the I Am the Solution virtual workshop for the continuing education of the soul. We're doing an event for Dr. Thomas Levy, who is going to be teaching protocols for helping your doctors. Doctors and practitioners are going to be attending this course. So share this with your practitioners to join so they can learn some of Dr. Levy's protocols. And we have so many other things that are Lilly approved in the Shop Now bag. So check it out. Also, you can become an enrolled student in the classroom. So please consider donating $1 or $1,000 a month, a one-time donation or a reoccurring donation, whatever you can do. Time, talent, treasure is greatly appreciated. And so today we have Dr. William Davis in the classroom. And I'm telling you, I want to do this super gut. It's a 4-week program that's going to reprogram or reset your microbiome. And I would love to use this information when we do this, Dr. Davis. I would love to use this information as part of your anecdotal teachings, because I have been given so many medications. There was a time that I was on medications for 2 years because of a reoccurring sinus infection. Well, it turned out it wasn't a sinus infection. It was acid reflux. Well, it turned out it wasn't acid reflux. And of course, they gave me all this medication, and I listened to and obeyed everything. I would go into the white coat trance. I hear and obey. And I took all these drugs, and I feel that I'm alive today because of the classroom, because of teachers like you that have come into the classroom. And so I'm just very grateful that you're doing this. I want to encourage all of you. You guys have it. If you're a subscriber, it's drdavisinfinitehealth.com. That is his website that you can go and learn more. And you have recipes for what you call quote unquote yogurt, or you can get your own book. It's called Super Gut. It's a 4-week plan to reset your microbiome, restore your health, and release weight. We want to release it. For those of you who want to release weight, it could make a difference in your health as well. And just focus on being healthy. So thank you so much for writing this book and being so passionate. I mean, you've done a whole series on the wheat belly books and recipes. This book also has some recipes, and it has I love the fact that you included coconut in there, because I can't have dairy and I can't have wheat. So sometimes I wonder when you hear certain doctors say, the only way that you're going to get better is if you have total raw food, if the only way you're going to be better, total animal products. And somewhere in the middle, we're missing these microbes that are causing us to get sick. So let's talk about, where do we get these microbes? Like you said a couple of times, you said that there's gastrus and there's other places where we can buy it. But what do we do with it? Share with how easy it is. You say it's easy for us to restore our microbiome. Help us understand how that plan works.
So, Lily, this is an evolving collection of products and ideas. And so we're still at the start. I tell people it's 1982, and I just gave you a Commodore 64 computer, 64K memory to play Pong.
I remember those days.
And we say, what? This is going nowhere. Of course, we now know, oh, yeah, it's changed human life, right? It's changed civilization. I think that's where we are. It's 1982, and we have a Commodore 64 playing Pong in the world of the microbiome. It's going to change. In the coming generation, it's going to be huge. It's already changing. It's not trickling down to John Q primary care, sadly, or gastroenterologist, but it's going to happen because of people like you and your listeners. And they say, I did this crazy thing. I restored Lactobacillus reuteri. And, I do this two-way Zoom once a week with my typically 80 people or so, 80 to 100 people. And that website you mentioned, my website, drdavisinfinitehealth.com. And it's not uncommon to have people sobbing with happiness because they realized they struggled for years and now they had the answer. And not only do they feel better, they also look better. They look younger. They're more vigorous. We've got one woman who, for instance, she's 75 years old. She looks like she's 50. And she claims to pass people on the trails on her mountain bike. She passed the 20 and 30 somethings. She's gained so much strength and vigor. And so this is not just about getting rid of bloating or diarrhea. It is that too, but it's also about regaining strength and protection from the diseases of aging and smoother skin and all. So it is awfully fun. But in order to do this, there's not like you can't just go to a health food store and get everything. It doesn't work that way. Some things you have to source from an online source. But here's a good thing. When you do these fermentation projects, whether it's yogurt or you're fermenting coconut milk or hummus or salsa or vegetables, you can ferment all kinds of stuff, purees. You don't have to buy the microbe again. You can make the next batch from a little of the prior batch. So there's a one-time commitment to buying these things. So like if you make what I call SIBO yogurt and you need the Gaceri, the BNR17, and the reuteri, and the Bacillus coagulans, you're going to have to buy it from 3 different sources. It's going to cost you probably something like $50, but you don't have to buy it again because you can make the future batches from some of the prior batch. So it sounds complicated. It's not. You do need a device. Microbes like human body, these microbes we're talking about, like most of them like human body temperature, meaning they reproduce at maximal rate at human body temperature, which is about 98, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it helps to have some kind of device that maintains that temperature. It could be a yogurt maker, could be an instant pot, could be a sous vide sticker basin, and some dehydrating devices, something that keeps the temperature around 100.
Okay.
Because if it's 70 degrees, like ambient room temperature, they won't reproduce at the same rate. You won't get those big numbers. If it's 110, some of those microbes die. So you want something just in that little narrow range, 98, 102, 103, something like that. They shouldn't cost you more than a few dollars. You can get a very nice stick sous vide, for instance, slow cooking meat.
What's a sous vide?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a slow meat cooker.
Oh, slow meat cooker. Okay. But a dehydrator will work, right?
It can. It helps to have a thermometer and check the temperature where you're going to be running it and make sure it's not too high. Because if your dehydrator is running 130, it's going to kill everything.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah. So it just helps but once you get it down, it's easy as heck. I've done probably hundreds of batches, no fails. So now I encourage people to take a look at the Super Gut book or my website. I have troubleshooting lists. So if you say, for instance, hey, there's this weird green film on top. Well, you got exposed to fungi. Just give it off, take a look, make sure there's no air vents blowing heat or air conditioning into your yogurt. Make sure there's no additives in your liquids. Like if you use, I like to use half and half, organic half and half. Got to make sure there's no gellan gum or xanthan gum, all the stuff they add to mix it, because that screws it up.
And in the book, you address all these things. You let them know what to look at. If you find that mold, you say just scrape it off. You can still use it. You just scrape off the mold. The fungi? Okay.
Yeah. An orange or green, typically discoloration, just scrape it off. But then think, why did that happen? Did you have it not covered properly? Was there air blowing on it? Is it near some kind of airflow? So there's very simple. Once you get it down, though, it's very easy. So people get overwhelmed by this, but it's very, very easy. I used to make it in my oven. Turn the oven on for maybe a minute and a half, let it warm up a little bit, turn it off. And do that every 4 to 6 hours. The problem with that is sometimes you forget, you turn the oven on, you end up baking it.
Yeah, you don't want to kill them. You don't want to kill the microbes. You want to keep them alive. So you want to keep them. So when you go and you go to the store and you look at live cultures versus like pills that, so is that something you can just put in your yogurt or you said that there was a product that you put in to create your own yogurt, quote unquote.
Right. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I think of it this way, Lily. I tell people, because they say, oh my God, gastrite, rhodori, bacillus coagulans. Think of it this way. You go to a restaurant, you walk in the door, waitress hands you a menu. You don't freak out and say, there's no way I can order all these appetizers and main dishes and desserts, right? You pick the ones you want. So what I did in the back of Supergut is I said, okay, if you want to lose abdominal waist circumference, ferment lactobacillus gasseri. If you want nicer skin, more moist, loss of fine wrinkles, and an increase in libido, let's ferment rhodori. If you want a reduction in knee pain from arthritis, let's ferment bacillus coagulans. If you want faster recovery, because you're a professional athlete or you work out hard, maybe you go to CrossFit or something, bacillus coagulans accelerates recovery. In other words, you can pick and choose the microbe you want for the effect you want. You want a healthier baby that is more likely to sleep through the night, has 50% fewer bowel movements, thereby 50% fewer diaper changes, less likely to have asthma, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and has a higher IQ later in life. Let's ferment Bifidobacterium infantis. And so you can pick and choose the microbe. Now, at some point, you say it's getting ridiculous. I'm fermenting 8 microbes. Clearly, it's a work in progress. And at some point, we're going to find a way to restore the whole thing.
Yeah,
but it's a work in progress. No one's worked out the entire process. That's why I say it's 1982, and I just gave you a Commodore 64.
Well, this is great. This is great. The book has a lot of information. Stay tuned because Dr. Davis and I are going to maybe do a class. We're going to do a nighttime where we come together and we learn and grow and maybe do this 4-week program. So we'll probably have to do this for 6 weeks, 1 week to come together and kind of identify what we need to do beforehand, get started, do the 4-week program and give our testimonials to Dr. Davis, because I think that this is so important for us to figure out that if the reason why let's say, for example, I don't have enough acid in my stomach, what can I add to it? I mean, we've got only a minute left. Maybe we can answer that in my in the Teacher's Pet Corner. When we do that, what can we do for stomach acid or to digest better our food, better digestion? But before we go, because we got about a minute wrap up, what is your main mission here for us to, if we can walk away with one thing, what would be that one thing?
With regard to stomach acid?
With regards to microbes.
With stomach acid, it's a tough one because it's typically due to H. pylori, autoimmune gastritis. And those things, once you damage your parietal cells in your stomach, they don't recover. So you're left with having to, if you do have hypochlorhydria, lack of stomach acid, you're left with kind of partial workarounds like supplementing betaine hydrochloride vinegars and carbonated seltzers to acidify, but it's not quite clear how effective those things are in inhibiting growth of microbes, oral and fecal, and restoring such things as vitamin B12 absorption. So it's an incomplete story. It's not perfectly worked out, but you're left with those kind of solutions. One thing I did not mention, Lily, and that's extremely important, is the outsized role for fermented foods. Mm-hmm. Kimchi, kombucha, kefirs, yogurts, veggies ferment on your kitchen counter. This can be almost no cost. The cost of cucumbers and some non-iodized salt and filtered water, and you can ferment on your kitchen counter at room temperature. It's very easy to do. Instructions are not in my book, of course. You can get this in many other places as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great
Yeah.
books on fermentation, but that clearly is it's probably half the solution right there. Just several servings of varied kinds of fermented foods every day. The interesting thing about fermented foods is the microbes in fermented foods, like Leuconostoc mesenteroides or Pediococcus pentasaceus, are not the ones that take up residence in your GI tract, but they somehow open the door to other microbes. No one knows how exactly, but that's why fermented foods should be at the top of your listeners' lists and steps to take to rebuild a healthy microbiome.
Oh, but so much more that we need to learn, because there's so many people who say, oh, no fermented food. Yes, fermented food. No kefir. Yes, kefir. There's so many things. So let's do this together, Dr. Davis. I would love to bring everybody in and go through this journey with me. Okay, you guys know what to do. Dr. Davis, infinitehealth.com. Stay tuned. We're going to do something together. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Dr. William Davis wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever.
Oh.
The micro
Advice
expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.
Okay. So there's so much more that we need to learn. And fermentation of food. I remember my dear friend, Judy, she brought me what I called a Furby. I don't know what it was, but it was like this animal. I think I still have it in my pantry. And she was so, excited to get, and I'm like, okay, there was this tea that she would make. And I think I still have it, or maybe I gave it back to her too, but it's, it helps with the gut and the microbiome and all of that. Are there particular things, like you said, it's like a menu, like you go there and you look at the menu. I want a little bit of rotari. I want a little bit of basilica, whatever it is that you were saying. So I don't know. I need to go to your chapter in the book where you have, if you want this is what you need. At what point do you get too much? At what point do you say, okay, well, I've got too much rotari now. I now look like I'm 3. So, you go back and you've restored your life and you're now looking like you're so much younger. Can too much of a good thing also hurt you?
A good question, but outside of people who are immunosuppressed, getting cancer chemotherapy, are neutropenic, don't have white blood cells, or some other related thing, taking immune suppressing drugs because they had a heart transplant. Outside of those very extreme situations, it doesn't happen. So I think the reason is because when we're talking, it sounds like we're talking about huge numbers of microbes, right? Hundreds of billions, but it's like a piece of sand on the beach compared to the trillions in your GI tract. And so there's a trend. It wasn't that long ago when most commercial probiotics only had tens of millions or a few million.
Yes.
Then it started to be billions.
Yes.
Now tens of billions. Unlike the pharmaceutical industry, we don't have billions of dollars to spend on research. So one of the things we lack is what's called dose response. That is, so like, for instance, a good example, there's a product called Osfortis. That's that Lactobacillus rotari. There's 5 billion per capsule. There's a very nice clinical study from Sweden, elderly ladies taking 10 billion counts of rotari as Osfortis every day over a year. The ladies taking Osfortis rotari had 50% less bone density loss compared to ladies taking placebo. That's all they did. There was no vitamin D, there was nothing calcium, nothing else, just rotari. So now if that's true for 10 billion per day, what would happen at 50 billion or 100 billion? Or 250 billion. Well, those are very expensive. Pharma has the budget for that. A lot of us don't have that budget. We have tried to run some dose response trials. There's some others who've done the same. And it looks as if 10 to 50 billion seems to be a sweet spot where you start to get bigger and bigger effects. So you see this, there are some studies, 1 billion, 5 billion, 1 billion, 2.5 billion, and 10 billion. And 10 billion seems to work better almost every time. Now, if 10 billion works well, is 50 billion better? We don't know. So there's still lots more. So I think the opposite is what we're seeing, that we're not getting enough microbes. I've never seen a human get too much microbes. Now, that's not to say that people can't have adverse effects from such things as probiotics or these fermented foods, but that's not a problem of the food or the microbes. That's almost always because they have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And by the way, I should also mention that the vast majority of food intolerances, probiotics, prebiotics, FODMAPs, nightshades, histamine containing foods, all that stuff, nuts, peanuts, almost all of those are from SIBO. And so the solution is not food avoidance. You can do that to reduce symptoms, but the real solution is address the SIBO and the reaction it sets up. And time again, you'll see somebody say, well, you know what? I got rid of the SIBO. I can eat all the eggs, eggplant and tomatoes I want, or the cheese or the red wine or whatever. They were avoiding it first. Now they can eat it with no problem.
And so if somebody has SIBO, which one would be the bacteria, the microbe that you want to look for SIBO?
So if you buy this argument that you can eradicate SIBO, you can test with the AIR device, or you could try to talk to your doctor and test for it. 9 times out of 10, they won't know how, even though the test is available in most clinics and labs, hydrogen breath testing. If you don't want to do that, you can just, because the solution, my so-called SIBO yogurt, what I think is a solution based on preliminary evidence, is so benign, so easy. I think it's, if you just said, you know what, I have fibromyalgia, or I have restless leg syndrome, or I have irritable bowel syndrome, or I have an autoimmune disease, or a neurodegenerative disorder, or I can't lose weight no matter what I do, or my blood sugar is stuck. If you have some problem, because the potential solution is so benign, that is the restoration of these microbes. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to assume I have SIBO and just try a 4 weeks course of this yogurt, see what happens. That would be reasonable. So very low cost, low hurdle way to deal with something. I would, even a year ago, Lily, I didn't think I'd be saying this, but now having witnessed this happen, about 40 people, where the vast majority convert to hydrogen gas negative with the AIR device, I'm very encouraged. We do need to do the clinical trial, but so far it's working.
Well, I tell you what, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to, for those of you who want to join us and we're going to start the baby steps. We're going to start learning we're going to do this together with Dr. Davis and I and all of you. So if you're interested, text me at 407-373-5959. Let's do this together worldwide. Anyone can join us. So we'll figure it out. Like we did the 12-week M-Cube detox experience, and that was phenomenal. We learned together. We did it as a community. And not only are we building community in our gut, we built community with each other. And this is the best way to learn and grow together. So if you're interested in joining us, text me at 407-373-5959. Share this with your friends, especially those who have gastrointestinal problems. But we already know that cognitive decline, diabetes, obesity, all those things, as Dr. Davis said, are also a potential of SIBO. So I believe that there's something within me that I'm doing everything I can do that to be healthy. But that missing microbe, if we have a missing microbe because they're keeping it from us because of the things that we're eating, don't have it, we need to reintroduce it to our body so we can live the best life that we can. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm excited to do this with you, Dr. Davis.
As an aside, keep on doing what you're doing. You and I have had tangles with media, and we know that our message, that is one of just health and honesty without drugs or procedures, is no longer welcome on major media. So what you're doing, Lily, is extremely important, more so than ever before.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for taking the time. I know this is not going to be the first time, but the last time that you're going to be on. I hope to get you back soon, because I want us all to feel empowered. And hearing these lactobacillus and rhodioid, all these names can become overwhelming. Just like when we learned that we had fungus in our body, it was like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. And if I'm feeling overwhelmed, maybe you are too. And if you know that something simple like creating your own yogurt, maybe watching, eliminating processed foods, do this for yourself, you have everything to gain. That's what I feel, because life is short. Life is short, and we just need to do everything we can to let our bodies respond lovingly. Love our bodies so that the body can respond lovingly. Final words before we go, Dr. Davis.
Grandma flipped out when she got a flip phone in 2003. Now she's texting her grandkids on her iPad, right? And so it's the evolution of knowledge. So your listeners will get comfortable with these ideas. It may take a little bit of time, may take a little bit of playing around with things and talking to you and talking to me. That's why I do that two-way Zoom every Wednesday night for a couple of hours with about 80 some people. Is they talk about my first batch didn't turn out, or I'm on my fourth batch and I'm starting to see real effects now. My skin is changing. So it's confirmation, it's affirmation, it's support and gaining confidence that you understand what you're doing. It's not that tough, but it's new and different.
It's new and different. That's, we can use the word stressed or upset, or we can say different and new and make it part of our life. And all of a sudden it changes who we are. Because the microbes in us dictate. They're like our little our what do you call those people that sequester somebody? They're like tyrants and making demands, and we need to get those out of our gut and put more loving and gentle microbes in there. The word just left my brain, so obviously I need to do this 4-week microbe repair, but as soon as we're done, I'll remember the name. It starts with a T. I think it's a T. If Robert was on, he'd type it. But anyway, we're going to work this together, and we're going to figure out how, if this is the missing link to improving our health. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for
Thank you, Lily.
Everything that you're doing. Thank you, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.